The maternity ward was unusually quiet that rainy Tuesday night. Nurses moved like shadows under the dim corridor lights, their footsteps soft against the linoleum floor. Amid the beeping machines and hushed whispers, a fragile cry broke through. A baby girl had just been born. Wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, she was beautiful even in her first moments. Almond-shaped eyes, tiny fists curled tightly, and a quiet strength in her soft whimper. But no one came forward to hold her. No name was given. No family waited with open arms. She had been left. The young mother, barely in her 20s, had arrived alone earlier that day. She gave birth in silence, eyes hollow, spirit distant. Moments after delivery, she vanished, slipping away into the night with no goodbye, no explanation. The only thing she left behind was a lie, a fake name on a hospital form, and a note scribbled with trembling hands, "Please don't try to find me. She's better off without me." Doctors and nurses, hardened by years of similar stories, still paused when they saw her. There was something different about this child. A calmness. A quiet dignity. She didn't wail like the others. She simply stared, wide-eyed and still, as if already understanding the cruelty of the world she had entered. Social services were called, protocols followed. She was officially declared abandoned. But as fate would have it, her destiny was already unfolding in the background. A man had been in the hospital that night, a wealthy businessman whose wife had died a year prior. He was there funding a children's ward in her honor. As he walked through the corridor, something drew him to the nursery. When he saw the baby girl, something clicked. Maybe it was the calm in her eyes. Maybe it was the ache in his own heart. Either way, he asked the nurse a simple question. "Does she have a name?" The nurse shook her head. "Then I'll give her one," he whispered, eyes misty. "Amara. It means grace." And just like that, a child abandoned in silence was chosen for something greater. From the moment Amara entered Mr. Douglas Okonjo's home, everything changed, not just for her, but for him too. His mansion, once cold and lifeless after the death of his beloved wife, began to echo with laughter, babbling, and tiny footsteps. Amara brought light to a house shrouded in grief. Douglas had lost his wife during childbirth, and though he had built an empire of wealth and power, his heart had been hollow until her. He didn't just adopt Amara, he loved her like his own blood. No expense was spared. World-class education, a personal nanny, ballet lessons, music tutors, and trips to places most people only dreamt of. But despite all the wealth, Amara grew up grounded. Douglas was intentional about that. He raised her with values. Kindness, discipline, self-respect, and a deep awareness that love, not money, was the greatest wealth of all. Every year on her birthday, he would tell her the same thing. "You may not have been born of my blood, Amara, but you were born of my heart. God gave you to me, and I made a promise to give you the life you deserve." Amara often wondered about her past, about the mother who had abandoned her, but Douglas never let her feel like a mistake. She was his daughter in every way that mattered. She carried herself with grace, confidence, and humility, despite being one of the richest young women in the country. By the time she was 22, Amara had graduated from a top university abroad and was managing her own tech startup, another gift from her father, who encouraged her to build her own empire, not just inherit his. But just when everything seemed perfect, the shadows of her past began to stir. A woman and a man, strangers, began showing up at charity events, following her discreetly, asking questions. At first, Amara brushed it off as random curiosity. But then they showed up at her office, claiming to be her parents. "We made a mistake," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "We were young, scared. But we're your real family." They begged to talk. They claimed they'd searched for her for years. But something about them felt off. Too rehearsed. Too sudden. And Amara could sense something wasn't right. Little did she know they didn't come back for love. They came back for money. And this time, they would learn, Amara was no longer the helpless child they left behind. She had a name, a legacy, and a father who raised her with strength, and she was about to defend it all. Amara sat across from the two people who claimed to be her parents. Her heart was pounding, not with excitement or joy, but with unease. They called themselves Martha and Ernest, names that meant nothing to her. She studied their faces for any spark of familiarity, any trace of the love a parent should have for a child. But what she saw instead was hunger. Not for reconciliation, but for something else. "You're our daughter, Amara," Ernest said, reaching for her hand with a trembling smile. "We lost everything after giving you up," Martha added dramatically. "But God gave you back to us. What a miracle." Amara raised an eyebrow. A miracle? Or an opportunity? Their expressions flickered. They had come with stories, tales of hardship, of regret, of redemption. They cried crocodile tears and spoke of being too young and broke to raise a child. But in the middle of their sobs, they dropped the act. Ernest leaned in closer. "We know who raised you. That billionaire, Douglas Okonjo. God rest his soul. Douglas had passed away peacefully 6 months ago. Surely he left something behind. We're your family, Amara. We deserve something. Anything. It's only fair." The temperature in the room dropped. That was it. That was all this was ever about. They hadn't searched for her. They hadn't loved her. They had watched from a distance until Douglas died, and now they wanted a piece of what they thought she inherited. Amara felt the rage rise, but she kept calm. She remembered everything her father had taught her. Some people will only see your worth when it benefits them. Don't give them what they don't deserve. Amara stood up. "Let me get this straight. You dumped me like trash at a hospital. Left me to die. And now that I've become something, you crawl back claiming blood ties? That's not family. That's greed." They tried to protest, but she silenced them with a wave. "You didn't lose me. You gave me up. And now, I'm giving you something too, distance. Never come near me again." They left that day furious, humiliated, and empty-handed. But they weren't done. Not yet. They had one more dirty move to make. And it would test everything Amara had become. Amara thought it was over, that her so-called parents had crawled back into whatever hole they had emerged from. But greed is a stubborn ghost. It doesn't rest until it destroys everything in its path. 2 weeks later, she got a call. Her lawyer was waiting in her office with urgent news. "Amara," he began, adjusting his glasses, "your birth parents have filed a petition to claim part of Mr. Douglas Okonjo's estate as your legal guardians." Her heart dropped. Legal guardians? After 25 years of silence? They had twisted the story, portraying themselves as remorseful parents who had found their long-lost daughter, only to discover she was the heir to a vast fortune. They claimed they had left her at the hospital due to a medical emergency and always believed she had died. Now, they said, they only wanted a chance to be a part of her life, and the estate that came with it. They were not just trying to steal her money. They were trying to rewrite history. Amara refused to be a victim. With her lawyer's help, she gathered every document, every hospital report, every testimony from her late father's friends and staff. She even got a hold of an old nurse who had worked at the hospital the day she was abandoned, an elderly woman who remembered the baby wrapped in a blood-stained towel and left with no name, no contact. And then came the will, Douglas Okonjo's ironclad, clearly worded declaration. To my daughter Amara, who brought light into my life and carried herself with grace even when the world gave her nothing. Everything I own is hers alone. No one, by blood or law, can take it from her. In court, Amara sat straight, confident. Her voice didn't tremble. She spoke her truth. I was not lost. I was thrown away. And I was not found by you. I was saved by a man who gave me everything you didn't. Love, protection, and dignity. You came not for me, but for the money. And that makes you strangers, not parents. The judge didn't need long. Case dismissed. Petition denied. Any further attempt to harass Ms. Okonjo will be met with legal consequences. Martha and Ernest left the courtroom disgraced, their scheme exposed to the public. In the age of social media, their story went viral, Nigerians everywhere condemning their shameless audacity. Some even called them parents of shame. Amara didn't celebrate. She just closed that chapter of her life with the quiet dignity her father had taught her. But one final twist remained, and it would change everything again. The storm had passed, but Amara felt a quiet ache in her heart. She had defended her legacy, her name, and her father's memory, but something still lingered, a longing. Not for those who birthed her, but for the man who had become her everything. She missed Douglas Okonjo more than words could ever express. His laugh, his quiet strength, the way he always saw her not as a charity case, but as his daughter. One evening, while sorting through his old study, she stumbled on a dusty envelope tucked inside a wooden box labeled for Amara. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter in her father's familiar, cursive handwriting and a small velvet box. My darling Amara, the letter began, if you're reading this, then I am no longer there to see the powerful woman you've become. I always knew the world would try to challenge you, but I also knew you would rise above it like you always do. She wiped a tear. This is not just a goodbye. It's a gift. Inside this box is the key to the home where I grew up. I've kept it all these years. I never returned, but I want you to go. I want you to see where I came from. Meet the people who helped raise me. Not everything in this life is about money. It's about people, stories, and roots. That is my final gift to you. Inside the box was a key and a small photograph of a quiet home in a village she'd never visited. The next weekend, Amara traveled to that village. There, she found people who remembered Douglas as a boy. They embraced her with warmth and tears. An old woman, his childhood nanny, hugged her and whispered, "He told us he had a daughter. He never forgot where he came from, and now through you, he's come home again." Amara spent a few days there, learning about her father's humble beginnings, his values, and how deeply he believed in giving second chances, not to those who didn't deserve it, but to herself, to others who were truly lost. Before she left, she stood at the foot of a mango tree where Douglas once carved his initials. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, "for everything, for saving me, for choosing me, for showing me that love doesn't come from blood, but from action." She returned home stronger than ever, not just as the heiress of a billionaire, but as a woman who had faced betrayal, pain, greed, and come out gold. The world didn't break her. It revealed her. And in the end, the girl abandoned at birth became the woman who would never be forgotten.